Welcome to the round table. I am Jennifer Eller, and with me today is our lead pastor, Mike Hill, and in between us is our homeboy, Andy Zay, who's actually an Indiana State Senator as well.
Yeah.
Great.
And a business owner, and from Huntington,
All the
and
right,
above.
like a long list.
Yeah.
Yeah. So can give us a short bio. So just so people, before we give us the bio of you, and then we'll kind of get the behind the scenes.
Right. The short bio is really, really easy. I mean, I was born, lived, and raised here in Huntington. Just like so many folks and so many members of your church and of our community. And I escaped to IU for 4 years, got a degree.
So do you still love IU? Or you
Most
didn't
of
become
it,
you
yeah.
didn't become a Purdue fan, did you?
Well, that's
Oh,
another story
Judas.
if you want to go that way. I've spent a lot of money over there.
No, I mean
My wife is a Purdue graduate.
Oh,
I've
my
graduated
God.
2 boys from there, and so yeah, we get
yeah.
over
So
there
you've
quite
defected.
a bit. Yeah,
you defected.
Oh no, I just got another IU degree in May, so we're double degreed at IU.
So if you're gonna watch basketball, who are you rooting for?
if they play each other, I'm always for IU, and
Okay.
I'm in spite of horrible seasons actually for both teams this weekend, I'll be all about the cream and crimson in the bucket game. So
Oh yeah. So the football.
speaking to a guy wearing a Bears fan,
no, listen.
we
I know,
can,
but the point is
we can talk
loyalty.
about average teams
God,
forever.
Jeez. Yes. It's like
But
constant.
I'm with you on the Cubs, and man, I don't know what I am as
Yeah,
a
well,
Colts
I
fan.
was- so
Colts
I-
give more games away than they win.
I started watching the Bears game, and then it's hunting season. So at
Oh,
bow
okay.
hunted, I hadn't killed my buck yet, so I go out, and so I'm sitting there with my phone, trying to get updates, and I'm like, the Bears are up. There's no way. I mean, it was like 40-some seconds to go. They can't give it away. They can't give it away.
Snatching defeat from the jaws.
Yeah. So then I'm like, yeah, they gave it away. Yeah. Again.
And it was the Lions.
The
wasn't
Lions,
it?
but the Lions aren't bad this year. So
That's when you know the world's upside down. I mean, we're talking
the
about
Lions-
the
the
Lions being
Lions
good
being
and
good.
the Browns being good. I mean, the
Yes.
world is upside down right
yeah,
now.
for sure. So how did you become a business owner in Huntington?
Well,
Always is it a family business?
yeah, I mean, I was born a business owner to a degree, from the standpoint that my grandfather and father. I'm the 3rd generation in the car business, and so when you're born into it, you're mowing the grass, you're
Yeah.
washing cars at a young age, and always shuttling vehicles for my father back then, and that's just the way it goes. And as my kids now are ingratiated in the business that we now and step in and help out at times, and so it's the legacy, the sentiment of that is really neat. The challenge is interesting because
Well, I'm going to ask a dumb question.
yeah.
So your car business, it's Zay Leasing, but you sell cars?
We sell, lease, and rent. We feature the leasing and rental. When
Okay.
I came back in after IU, I came and joined the family business. We started renting then,
Okay.
and renting became a pretty big deal, and that's kind
Okay.
of my heritage within the business. And so
So
I'm
it's
pretty
more
proud
of a
of
rental.
that.
Like you're not a car lot.
Yeah.
Yes, you are a car lot.
Wait, everything we have is for sale.
That's what I say. Everything I own is for sale.
So it's just a matter of agreeing.
So
on that
somebody can
price.
just show up there and buy a car.
Yeah, absolutely. But we don't.
I didn't know that. I thought everybody just rented
Yeah,
stuff from you.
we don't play that traditionally. I don't do that advertising, and that's it is a significant part of our business. But we just use that with our our customers and our clientele. That a lot of them we rent and then sell them because they're in a car, maybe because their car was in an accident,
Right.
So they have to replace their car, or they're over here and they need something for their child or something.
Right.
Because we try and I try and play within a certain marketplace, which the market's completely upside down still since COVID. But so we're trying
In a
to find
which
our
way?
identity. Horrible. I mean,
Right.
people are paying more for cars than they ever have still.
Right.
And
And now from the UAW thing, they're going to be paying more forever.
well, sure. And I mean, but what it has kind of done, because the price of the aftermarket used cars is so high, is it's really kind of brought to some degree the new car market into play. So a lot of people, I think, that were historical, would buy a lot of our nice used stuff are now buying new, and that's fine. But it's still a very, I mean, what has happened that the average Joe, average Jane does not understand is 3 to 5 million cars have been taken out of the American fleet. So the demand.
Where'd they go?
they were never replaced. They were never built.
They're sitting in
through COVID.
parking lots up in Fort Wayne.
No, they were never built.
They just didn't get done during COVID?
Yeah, because the supply lines and everything, there were so many fewer cars built through the last 5 years.
Okay.
And so it's a changing marketplace. A big supplier of the fleet cars is typically the big rental companies, the Hertz, Avis, Enterprise, those guys. But even if you go rent from them as you're on vacation now, a lot of people, what you'll notice is the car you're renting has 50, 60, 80,000 miles on it. And they would never do that prior. I mean, they would get something new and rent it for maybe a year.
Right.
And then it would go out and they would replace it. But that model has changed. And so it's just kind of been absorbed into this national fleet that has been suppressed, which has increased the demand, which unfortunately for the consumer has kept prices sky high.
Yeah, and it's nothing against your business, but vehicles are the worst investment ever in the life of anything in the world, right?
I get it.
I mean, I
get it.
hate vehicles.
Don't buy
You
cars.
'em.
Don't buy cars to get rich.
Yeah, you buy a car and then it just depreciates and you fix it all the time. That's why I just I'll just keep fixing the junk I have because it's, yeah. Anyway, I got off the subject
Well,
a
we're a
little bit.
little sidetracked. I didn't
Who takes
talk about how cars are junk.
Hey, I drive junk. No,
Our
I'm not
family's
saying-
kind of made a living out of this junk.
So
But that's where customer service and the people side of the business is so important to us.
yeah, so before we get into more deeper into who you are, how do you make the leap from being a car lease family business guy to be like, wow, I want to be in the government?
That-
How does that that seems like a big leap.
It does seem like a big leap, but I think, as I explain here, you'll understand it's really, a very good segue.
Okay.
And for me, and I guess going back a little bit, how do you market your business? How do you market anything these days? Our newspapers have been diminished so poorly. I mean, I have 5 times, 10 times more Facebook followers than there are subscribers of the local paper now. I grew up with my parents leafing through 3 or 4 papers every single day. And so that's where your ads were. That's where you did that. So I kind of took it on both as just a civic-minded business owner and a way to market my business by being engaged in the community. So for 10 years, I ran the PAL football program, the flag football program out there. So it was a way for me to give back to the community and be with my kids who were playing through that program, and of course serve the PAL program. And I did the same at the Y and was very engaged with the Y basketball program. Was involved with some programs here at your church and others. And it was just being out in the community was a way to get involved. And so, and then also promote my business because people identify my business with me. And so as you did that and move along, civic engagement, public service, government, kind of became a natural. Because when you're in business, you're getting, permission
Sure.
to do everything. And so you're interacting with the government on a fairly regular basis. So with that, you get involved and then you decide that you want to stand behind friends or, distinguish between one candidate versus another and support a candidate. So through, the last 20, 30 years, I was very engaged and tried to, be an influencer in those areas and make sure I had people that I identified, business-minded folks that were in public service that, would watch out for business, watch out for communities and, stand with that. And so through that, when Jim Banks ran for the congressional seat that he now holds, he vacated his state Senate seat. And I had supported Jim, supported Mike Pence when he ran for governor, Dan Coates when he ran for U.S. Senator for Indiana. And so you kind of look around and, who's going to take that seat. And what I was looking for as a person who had been involved in politics was someone that had some family values, small business, was community-minded. And as my wife and I, discussed that, it was me. And so, then once you step over that, then it's game on.
Yeah. Well,
Then the competitive side
Yeah,
comes
I mean,
out. Now we got to go win this.
It would be interesting to me if you go through today and you poll 18 to 25-year-olds, or even how many of you are aspiring to be a public servant in government office? I just wonder how many people would even process that as a path in their life.
And that's a great point, and you could really broaden that discussion.
Yeah.
How many want to be pastors? How many want to be teachers? How many want to work in manufacturing, which to some degree has been vilified? How many want to work in these different trades and occupations? And that's, really where we've been intentional in educating. And our educators have responded great, where we're talking about pathways to graduation different, because we just want to expose our kids to what's next. And a high school degree, when we got our degrees, is not what it is today. We really want those kids to have some purpose, some sense of direction, where they're heading. And, it can be twofold. Expose them to what serving in government looks like. I don't want any part of that.
You don't want to expose them to what
expose
it's
them
like.
to something at Parkview and Health. Oh, I don't want to go in that degree. So I mean, it's helping them sort out what their skills are. Are they strong at math? Are they strong at science? Are they interested in doing this as a career? And so we're really trying to a lot of the policy we've created, which our teachers are executing very well throughout the state, is just that mentoring, that exposure to what's next and what comes after high school. And even in the education domain, they're graduating with certificates, credentials, where they're actually prepared to go in the workplace in some instances. So we've done that a little bit, and at least from the state vantage point. We're working on that a little bit at the local vantage point. But to expose people to what public service is. And with that, in Indianapolis, we have what we call internships. They come and serve during our session. And then they can evolve to a position of what's called a legislative assistant, where they serve us. And basically a lot of that is constituent services, sometimes digging into policy and figuring out what's been done, what can be done, and working with different professionals. So there's a long way to go there in educating kids to what's next. But like I said, I think that's a global thing. And really trying to work with our youth and expose them to what could or what can be next.
Yeah, I think sometimes the biggest gap is most decisions made today at a young level are for happiness. So I'm going to make a decision that is going to make me happy. I'm going to make a decision that makes me enough money. Choose a career that picks enough money. I don't know how many people are processing. I want to pick something that changes the world. I want to pick something that makes a difference. I want to pick something, you know what I mean? Like if I make this decision.
I smirk a little bit. This feels like a sermon.
But you know what?
No, and I say that
I don't know.
appropriately. How many times have I conversed with my kids, and I'm sure how many times have you preached, there's some sacrifice in getting to the end game.
Yeah.
They want it now.
Right.
This generation wants it now.
Right.
And it's the culture they live in. It's the cell phone that gives them Google their answer right away.
Right.
Google their satisfaction. Oh, I'm going to go to a game now. I'll go on StubHub, and you can go right in.
Right.
I mean, we used to plan this. If we were going to a Bears game, you thought about 6 months in advance and planned it, and you got the tickets, waited for the hard ticket to be mailed back to you, panicked when it wasn't there 2 months early. And now it's like, oh, we'll figure it out.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. I wonder like how we can start transforming, and maybe that's how it is. Just start bringing more awareness to that sort of a thing, is that you can make a difference.
Oh, it's a great dialogue. And I think that's where our churches and our families and our communities need to be more intentional. And I've seen that with myself. I mean, I reflect back on my parents and my upbringing, and it's like, no way.
Right.
In this day and age, no way.
Right.
I mean, don't embarrass the family, go out and work hard and just follow me.
Right.
There was never intentional discussions on some of the hard issues that we have today with sexuality, with drugs, with, education and making sure you're stewarding them through. You went out and did it.
Yeah.
And, the conversations I've had to have with my children and honestly, some of their friends and groups, it's, we in the public sphere, we as parents, you as a pastor and you, in your faith team, we have challenges like we've never seen before. And we're competing against technology. We're competing against the influences of the dark technology. We're competing for time and attention from these kids that we brought into the world.
Right.
And, what are these, everybody's looking for an answer and a solution, and it's not in a book. It's not written on a wall. It's not, we could argue it's in the Bible, and it is, but how do we impress that in their minds, which are, scrambled, running 100 miles an hour from the moment they get up? They probably wake up, so many of our kids wake up to their phone.
Right.
So that's where their alarm clock is.
So why do you think it is that, and I would just say this is not for everybody, but this has been a long-standing thing since I've been in ministry. So when I first got in ministry as a part-time youth pastor, the advice that I got from people was don't talk about two things, right? If you talk about these two things, you're going to have all kinds of problems. Don't talk about money and don't talk about politics, those two things. If you talk about those two things, you're going to have issues going down the road. So why is politics, why is that sphere, why does it cause so much angst with people? Why is there so much hatred and so much why is there so much divide when it comes to politics?
Wow, this is great. This is deep for Tuesday morning.
Are you kidding?
This
is this is just something I've been thinking about.
You're not supposed to answer questions with questions, but just to put this into context, I'm
Okay.
going to turn this back on you a little bit.
Okay.
And you counsel a lot of marriages and a lot of families and even our own. When is our relationship with those closest to us in most peril or most stress? When we're not communicating.
Right.
When we're not being transparent with each other.
Right.
So to that point, I would say, when is our government most in shambles? When are our finance most in shambles? When we're not talking about it.
Right.
So I would push back and say, we do need to talk. We absolutely need
Sure.
to talk about politics and government in our faith sector, because they do cross.
Right.
You know, we spend a lot of time in the public sphere talking about the separation of church and state. And that is that the state is not going to say, this is our faith.
Right.
Life Church is the church for Huntington, Indiana. For the state of Indiana, this
Right.
is our church. No, we don't do that. But we know God is with us.
Right.
And I know God is with me. I'm going to Indy today. We will open up our session with prayer. And we do every day.
Right.
And we have a chaplain, Matt Barnes, who does a phenomenal job. We have a Bible study that meets every Tuesday. And we actually have continued that now. We do that by Zoom through the year for any legislators that can come in and participate. And you need that sense of relief. But I'll tell you what happens in the State House when you're arguing or getting down to debating on bills and it's down to a few words, there's tension and you this and you that. When you go to Bible study, some of those things
Yeah.
begin to level out, and you get a little more perspective when you inject the faith, when you inject Jesus and this parable or that parable and brings that levity. Well, okay, I see that. And agreement has been reached in
Right.
our Bible study. But beyond that, just the peace of mind. And, everybody's here doing the right thing. And the fact that I'm surrounded in my chamber in the Senate by, I would say, well over half active practitioners in faith, and certainly everybody believes in God and some sort of faith. And that's empowering.
Right.
I mean, that is cool. And
Yeah.
that's, you don't go to the microphone, you don't do a press release on
Right.
that. But the people of Indiana need to know that they have faith-filled leaders down in Indianapolis serving them. And I know we do here locally, and you do in many domains. So why should we be so afraid of it?
Well, I would say
we
this-
don't need to do the Mike Hill or the, Pastor so-and-so or that.
Right.
But it's okay. It's
Right.
okay. And we should want leaders that have a faith-filled foundation.
Right.
Because it keeps temperaments down. It keeps that levity. It keeps that balance between their life and their family and their public work. And it helps build those bridges to get good things accomplished and to hopefully solve some of these bigger societal issues that we have.
But I think let's go back to what you said. So, Jennifer, you've done these two. So you're in meetings as much as I am with people that are having problems. So back
Right.
to what you said. So when there is a breakdown, so whether it's a breakdown in the family of marriages, whether it's a breakdown in kids and their parents, if it's a person that has been out of the church, because this is a lot of the state of Indiana, right? Because we are maybe not as much anymore, but very conservative. Most people have been to church, right? It's not like they've never walked into the church. A lot of people here came and left, right? Like they went to a church or they grew up in a church and figured out it was something they didn't want. Most of the issues that we deal with, that the breakdown happens, that does need to be talked about is, so the reason it's about money, one of the things that's distrusted the most in church is money, taking money, how they use money, the distrust of leadership, because they've seen leadership acting in a way that they don't trust. So there's a breakdown. So when I said don't talk about it, the more of what I was saying is that there is a reason. I get it. We should talk about it, but why does the public not trust the church, right? So what is it about church leadership? What is it about the things that have happened in the past that the church has to overcome, right? Like, we have to do that. We have to figure out how to overcome some of these stereotypes. We have to choose to reveal truth, because some of those things for them are true. There are churches that have, and there are churches that have done, but it doesn't represent the mass, right? And so people look at things as, because of decisions of a few people, represent a mass. So we have to build back up trust to, like, you can trust leadership and you can trust church. And I would say most of the reason that people struggle with politics or politicians is trust, right? Like, I would say most people are saying, and again, back to my limited knowledge on politics, right? So this whole January 6th thing, that's going on. So you hear all of the things that happened, and now all of a sudden there's these videos coming out, and now all of a sudden these people that supposedly people got in trouble for doing something, and then they show on a video that they didn't really do it. Yeah, so this, like, how does that happen? You know what I mean? So there's this, and I'm not asking you to answer that, but you know what I'm saying? So if you're looking from the outside, you unfortunately get painted in a broad picture. And I'm not saying you in general.
No, I understand.
It's just a broad perspective of, can I trust you?
No, I think trust is brought about in two ways, and that's transparency and conviction.
Yep.
And if you're not transparent, that's a bigger part of the problem. And I can't speak to the January 6th situation quite as well, but an example that I've given a lot as I'm running for Congress now to represent Northeast Indiana is this, what they call continuing resolution omnibus spending. We have a country now that's $33 trillion in debt. You can't even fathom all the zeros that go behind that. But you have to consider a few things. First of all, we are spending at a level about $6.9 trillion a year on revenues of about $4.8 trillion a year. So we're in a path where we're just adding to that deficit organically, naturally. And then when you talk about continuing resolution, that's just all, that is exactly what it is. So in other words, we're spending $6.8 trillion. Well, we're just going to continue to spend that. And the reason I tell this is this. I believe all the heavy lifting's done in committee work. And so you probably have some committees here within the church. You're not making those decisions. They're making them for the cafe. They're making them for the gym. They're making them for the other ministries that you have. And they're talking that, and then you're giving it its blessing. That's a great idea. I'm glad you guys have vetted that out. It makes sense. Or, adjust it here or whatever.
Sure.
But that heavy lifting's done in committee work. And that's also where the transparency is. That's where the congregation, and at the government level, that's where the public has the opportunity, or their representation has the opportunity to get their hands on the legislation, get their hands on it. When you do continuing resolution in our finances, it's just doing more of the same. It's the process that's broken. It needs to get into the committee level where people can weigh in, where it's transparent. You can see the debate happen. You can see the definition of priorities and where we're going to spend our money. And I think, there's applications really both ways as you talk about regaining trust in church and regaining trust in government. The institutions of our society, from healthcare to some bigger business to government, took a huge hit the last few years. And we've got to work hard to rebuild that. And a huge component of that is transparency.
Right.
And sticking to a process where in a democratic republic that we have, the design is for people to be engaged.
Right.
And so even if it's out of whack, it's like, well, we told you it was going to be out of whack. We talked about it. We had a debate on it, and here it is.
Right.
But when you do a continuing resolution, you're not doing that.
Right.
That whole process is gone. And I think that transparency is what is going to reinvigorate that trust. And it's kind of like, here we go. This is what we're offering. This is what we're presenting. There's nothing hidden here. There's no back room. There's no dark secrets. And so that process, I think, is important at the church level and certainly at the government level.
Yeah. So tell me, so speaking ignorantly,
Yeah.
so if you're going to be transparent at the government level, not just you, anywhere in the government level,
Yeah.
how do we know anything? Like, how would I know how to weigh in on a debate, or how would I
Well,
know
it-
something's going to affect me? Like, I don't know what
Right.
it would
It's-
be, but
it's-
something's going to affect me, and I want to weigh in. How do I do that?
Well, it's very daunting, and you don't just jump in and do it.
Okay.
But you need to. I would say the first thing is to know your representative.
So tell you.
Yeah. I represent the people.
Okay.
So I am your conduit to ideas and legislation, to functions of government at the state level.
Okay.
At the local level, you have your mayor, you have your council people. On Sunday, if you bring your folks in, if you peeled them apart and said, "Do you know who your city councilman is?" They might be able to name one or two, but they wouldn't know who theirs is, because
you
there's
know?
districts all around town.
Do you know who the city council people are?
Well, my father-in-law was one.
Yeah.
Hey,
There you go.
Nick, do you know?
Not by district. So I mean,
Yeah, so you're pointing
You
out
should
what
do-
we don't know. You're
well,
right.
people should do their own internal little bit of civics lesson to know who their representative is, and they should work through that. But more broadly, and when you talk about issues, depending on what they are at the state level, certainly at the federal level, it's like you can't run down for every hearing. It's 2 hours down and 2 hours back. I mean, you're giving up your day to come
Right.
down and testify on an issue. But there are associations, there are groups that represent your interests, can keep you, one, informed, or two, if it is a big issue, they'll invite you down at the right time to tell this story, and they'll tell you where you can influence and impact. And so you have to find groups or associations that you want to identify with, that you want working for you, and build that trust and build that relationship. But it's a relational business, so I mean it's building those relationships over time, to making sure that you get the government you want.
Yeah.
And and I, as an individual, as a representative, I try and be a conduit of that. But more broadly, there are associations then that will follow every single bill that we file and every issue, and whether you should weigh in and how you should weigh in on those issues, and what the impact might be on your church community, your Huntington community, your Huntington County, Northeast Indiana, or whatever other interests you have in between.
Let's just use so give me a hot topic. How long have you been doing this?
This winter will be my 8th year.
So in 8 years, there's like this big deal, right? Like a decision. Something came up, something was going to change. So play it out for me, how it works. Like, here was the decision, here's how people weighed in, and here's how you came to a conclusion on how to make a very controversial decision. Because again, I don't want it to get, I hope this isn't a big deal. I'm just trying to get in my own mind, here's a big deal that's going to affect a lot of people, right? I don't even know what it is. Something like, if this happens and this decision's made, it affects a bunch of people. And so in that, the process of using you for a conduit, right? That's the idea is that, because we talked about this before we got on. So this is very intriguing to me to think through. So the separation of church and state is good from the standpoint of, you can't tell us what to do, right? Like, that's a great thing. Like, you can't say, this is the only church people in Huntington go to. You can't, well, I mean, you can try to shut us down during COVID, but
That's good. That's good.
But anyway, you know what I'm saying? Like, that's a good thing, but there shouldn't be a separation from those who are believers to partner with those who are believers, partner with the people that can make differences in moving it forward.
It's a pretty wide, pretty broad brush, but let's try this.
Okay.
And it's something that's well discussed
Okay.
throughout political circles, throughout communities.
Okay.
And it's mental health.
Okay.
Mental health is a huge issue. It's been well documented through academia, the challenges. Our correctional community, sheriffs, jailers, et cetera, commissioners who are responsible for those budgets and things. We've tried to just jail mental health a little bit, / addiction. We know that's not working. We're releasing them back out in the society. They're finding their drugs. They're going back. So there's a lot of pressure on mental health. So people are telling me, I'm visiting with Place of Grace, and we have a handful of those ministries. The commissioners and the new community corrections, what's the answer? What's the solution? Every county's doing a little bit different, and how does it work? Well, a little bit intuitively, and my concern, first of all, with these issues, and this is me putting my ideology right out front. I hesitate when people look to government for the answer.
Okay. I love that.
I'm not sure. I'm not sure that we are the best solution.
Right.
And so for me, it was gaining a little bit of background, a little bit of insight. And it's great that we're sitting here because I love telling this story. The DARS report measures faith-based participation.
Okay.
And 15 years ago, the participation in faith in the country was 49%.
Okay.
And this is a pretty low bar. That's going to church or a faith-based 1 hour, one time a month.
Right.
Last year was 20. We've lost 29% in just 15 years.
Right.
And my wife, our family, we're regular tenders. We go every week and try and go a little bit more. And I reflect on that from my personal perspective and those that I know and those around me and some of the ministers and folks that I relate with on a regular basis. How does the faith community and mental health intersect? Because I know when I go to church, we talk about forgiveness, we talk about love, we talk about loving one another, we talk about loving our family and bringing some peace back to mom and dad and the kids. And there is a huge component of mental health just in that exercise and in praying regularly and realizing there is a higher being and in realizing that God, Jesus is on your shoulder when you're making big decisions, when you're making small decisions, but to realize that every decision is not the end of the world or that monumental and that time will heal and that there is forgiveness and there are great examples and great stories in the Bible that help us with that in times of stress and anxiety. And it doesn't mean the stress and anxiety and the challenges of life will go away, but it gives us a perspective internally, but it also gives us a community relationally to help walk through some of these things. So how's government going to fix that? Because I've seen that play out in many different churches, as in many different Bible studies. I shared about it a few moments ago within legislators that get together for Bible study. So, I mean, there's a lot of healing, a lot of different emotions that, come out and are settled through that. So when you talk about an increase in mental health, how much of this is relational mental health that could be cured by an increase in the faith community and even some of our strong not-for-profits rising up? I believe that would suppress this crisis holistically. So anyhow, it all becomes about money. So we need, I don't know what it was, they wanted like $500 million.
Who wanted $500 million?
Some of the
Mental health people?
public
Got it.
public health agencies. Mr. Flieger runs ours here. We're responding a little bit to how things worked out through COVID, and do we have enough public health? There's some pretty damning, pardon the expression there, studies of where we were rated in the bottom 5 in different categories. One was public health spending, one was tobacco use, one was obesity, and so I'm like, yeah.
Let me suck it in a second.
I
Why you said that.
hit a little close to home there, Pastor. But I just don't believe that, okay, so we can throw $100 more at it. Is that going to fix, this public health crisis that we're talking about? And, so I'm trying to equate it. And, there's a case to be made for increasing some spending. I get that. We can do things a little bit differently. But I was concerned of making it a huge budgetary item and the heavy hand of state government even coming down to local government saying that we can fix this by spending more money. And there were examples actually right here in the state, because there were about 4 or 5 counties that had superseded this average threshold that had spent over this, the I would say 50% or the average. And they weren't any more healthy. They weren't any leaner. They weren't any less smoker. And it was a lot of our larger counties, Bloomington, Monroe County, Marion County, Indy, St. Joseph County. So, that to me was a simple template right here within the state saying, well, money isn't necessarily the answer. And then, you really kind of have a clash of public health does with freedom. Simply put, if smoking's bad, let's just outlaw it and say, be done with it. If we're going to give people the freedom to do it, you're giving people the freedom to do it. Yeah, we can tax it more. We can do different things. And, I'm not encouraging or promoting it, But where's the rub? How do we get to a solution on some of these things? So it's a huge debate. And the huge debate is, how do we move forward with a mental health, public health crisis?
Right.
And, we're still a little bit in shock of COVID. We're shocked about, in some cases, how we were treated as churches, as individuals. We were shocked about where it came from. We're still trying to transparently find out the background on that. But in spite of that, there were some things that came up in the public health sphere, and we've seen a little more anxiety a lot more anxiety in mental health than that. But it's how do we resolve that? And at the state's vantage point, how are we a part of that solution? What role should we or shouldn't we play? And I struggled with that immensely. Yeah. I think there were some things there that were problematic, but I didn't see a clear path that we were going to be a better part of the solution. And so I was a little tepid on that. We've seen some creative, we've seen some collaborating where, the mental health, the BOA centers, the Parkview Behavioral Health, and other mental health are more engaging with our Department of Corrections. We have, community corrections is a lot different than jail. They have the capacity to come and go, earn their keep. They have resources available to them right there when they are there, 12-step, et cetera, and making themselves better. Mm-hmm. So, we did end up making an investment. I think it was $200 or $300 million over a 2-year budget cycle. We are looking at some regionalism where counties can collaborate and work together. So there, I think there's movement there, but the key now is to be subtle a little bit and see how it plays out.
Yeah.
And not get overly involved, because it's a very fluid kind of area when you talk about mental health. I mean, there's days I wake up and question my own mental health. So we all have our own mental health.
So I think
what have you.
So from the beginning,
Mm-hmm.
I think that this is clear. So if we're going to go back to what is the church's responsibility, right?
Yeah.
Because I think this is a big thing. And I've tried to fight against this from starting the church. I think it's the church's responsibility to take care of those people who are in need. I think that that's the way God set it up. I think that's the model that you see. The problem is that if we don't, who does, right? So that's how, so again, I'm going to give you my theory, and it's not founded on all facts. It's founded on my thoughts. So just so we're clear. So my thought is the church, from the standpoint of what God called us to do and the decline, you made it very clear. There's less people involved in it and less people willing to engage into helping people because it's messy. And now it's easier not to, because the government social systems have taken the place of and made it so that you don't have to. Like, we've made it so that the church doesn't have to respond, and to the point where it's almost made it easier for them and more productive for them to stay on social services than it is to be helped by somebody else or go down the road with somebody else and not force situations into dealing with the real issue. I'll just give you an example, like healthcare. Healthcare is a big deal, from the standpoint of it makes more sense for a young married or a young person with a daughter not to get married so that they can keep social service health care than to get married and then be on that person's income to be able to get health care, right? Mm-hmm. So it encourages something that's not good. Somebody who can get, when we took in the kids, like when we took in the 5 kids, there was an encouragement for that family not to work because they were getting $1,500 a month in food stamps, right? And here's how the system works. So we take in the kids, he continues to get the food stamps, right? Like that system of, well, they're still his kids. And even though, like, it's a broken system that encourages, and this is just, again, these are my theory, is broken system that encourages people not to work, encourages people to not do the right thing when it comes to figuring out healthcare, because healthcare can bankrupt you. And we've seen it that way, and the systems can do it that way, and encourages the church that, like, why should we get involved? Because there's tons of social services now. That doesn't mean we shouldn't, doesn't mean that the church shouldn't, and I would agree with you. If we keep depending on the government to fix it, it's just going to be a circle that goes around and around and around.
Yeah, I mean, you've defined many of the safety net services. You run into that cliff. The gray area, as I call it. How do you transition from
Yeah.
the need for that
Sure.
at the urgency at some point to transitioning off of that, and it becomes there is no, fluid. Our former state rep Dane Leonard always had an interesting philosophy with this. I don't know why I'm sharing this; it just came to mind. But on unemployment, he said you should actually give them month one, give them 150% of what they were making, but then have it on a decreasing scale. So by the 6th month, you're down to half. The 9th month, you're down to a quarter, and then maybe level it off, rather than an arbitrary amount that you do with some formula that you sustain over a long time, because it creates the incentive and it creates that pathway. But what I really want to go back to, that I think you're really touching on, is a philosophy that I've kind of formed over the last few years, and looking at the mental health. The health crisis is good as well, and that is, government is good to the point of intervention. If my house is on fire, I want a fireman.
Yeah, for sure.
If there's a crime going on, I want a policeman there now.
Right.
DCS situation, if there's a family in distress, we need a caseworker there to figure out where mom and dad and where the kids
Yep.
should be. We need to sort that out now. That's it.
Right.
Where government is very inadequate is from there to the human condition, to that human services point. And the example that I use is this. We've seen this dramatic increase in fentanyl and meth and drugs permeating throughout our society. Yeah, there's issues of how to deal with that, on how it got here and all that. But we are creatively, as communities, coming up with solutions. We have a lot of different halfway houses and different programs. By and large, the addiction and recovery centers that are faith-based ministries are way more successful than institutional programs. And what I mean by that is, folks that go into faith-based ministries for addiction and recovery help have an 80% success rate. Only about 20% of them go into recidivism and get back into drugs. In institutional setting, it's completely reverse. 20% of them have success, and 80% of them are in recidivism and get back into drugs. And it's just to the heart, literally the heart of what you're speaking. And I think we could even see it in ourselves a little bit if we look. And what I mean is, if I'm going in to help you with addiction and recovery for a $15, $20, $25 an hour paycheck, is my heart there for you to help you out? Whereas in these ministries, they're there. And we've heard some of the folks speak and some of the gals speak that have been through horrible incidents. They want you better, and they'll give you and help you in any way they can. So they're connecting, though there may be a paycheck involved, but they're also connecting to your heart and your soul and empathy because they've been there. And it's that connection that you're not going to get in a job to do that in that space. And I think that's a little bit of what you were saying in some of the healthcare space, because you're connecting people and you're connecting beyond the job. You're connecting into the heart, you're connecting into the soul, and either changing or relationally, and being relationally connected with those people that make a difference. And, I should give the disclaimer that there are examples of that happen in the institutional side. There are people that are exceptions. But by and large, you're not going to have that connection as you will in a faith ministry. And, that's an example where I see that play out very, very clearly.
Well, and I think that's and weigh in at any time, Jennifer, when you think that I'm like off. But I think the problem today is that for whatever reason, it's difficult for people to engage into the mess, right? So part of the big separation of how do we as believers help those who are in a mess? And so the church has got somewhat of a reputation of being a country club separate from the world, right? Like, here's a group of people that have their life pretty well cleaned up and will give money to somebody else to take care of the mess, right? Like, we've disengaged from the church. Should be all a part of the mess. In fact, the church should be a mess with people.
Well, that or they don't know how. which is a perfect segue into my
Okay.
other.
Yeah.
People ask me, particularly now that I'm running for Congress, what you've been down there 8 years. What's your most impactful piece of legislation? The $1 billion in the budget, or changing or affecting education or higher ed or criminal code and fixing all that. There's simply a program called the Care Portal.
Okay.
And the Care Portal is a beautiful concept brought to me through the Global Orphan Project, and former Chief Financial Officer of Indiana's Department of Child Services, Doug Weinberg. He was CFO under Mitch Daniels' era when Mitch Daniels was governor. And then he went out to Nebraska and served under Governor Pete Ricketts and ran their entire family and children services. But he ran into this program called the Care Portal. And what the Care Portal does is it uses the basis of technology to embrace the faith community and connect it to where government services are needed. So the example and how it works here in Indiana, we've kind of built it out in the DCS domain, in the DCS element. So we've partnered with the Department of Child Services in trying to support them, because when a caseworker goes into a setting, they have two choices: leave the child there or remove the child. And they're defining that in one of two domains. One is there abuse or neglect, or is there abuse and neglect, or whatever, and they have to remove the child on that basis. And so many times there's gray area there. Mom's working her heart out, trying to do it. It's a lot more about poverty than it is actual setting, but the kids are sleeping on the floor. And that's one of the definitions that has to have them removed. So if they had bedding, they could stay together. You keep the family whole. So what the Care Portal does, there's a host in every community in the 12 counties that we're in now. And that host engages the faith or not-for-profit community that registers with the portal. So in an instance like that, the caseworker will be the vetter, determine whether a material need can be met, put it in the Care Portal. It will blast out to the ministries that are signed up, and then they decide whether they can meet that. And they respond, get that. The caseworker will coordinate, get the bedding into that home, and that way you can keep the family unit together. But more importantly, I argue, is you can also build that relation, and you can build a little bit of a mentorship where maybe they can help that mom or that family along and get them down the road if there are other needs that come up. And then from a government standpoint, the thing that I love about it is accountability. Every time a material need's met, you log it and how many kids you've served. So right now I can pull it up on my phone, and I think we've saved the state of Indiana over $5 million and served over 2,500 children. And to your point, I think there are great ministries within our churches that maybe even are helping within the church when problems arise. And they would love to help DCS and a family, as you have personally, but they don't know how. And so this creates that conduit of the how. And it's like, we need this, boom, boom, and you do it. And you have the vetting of the need, you have the meeting of the need, and then you have the relation that hopefully can go beyond that transaction.
Yeah, and I think it's for us. So this is what we've talked about all the time, is that we want to be able to, like we have a fund called Acts of Love, right? So Acts of Love, the idea of it is that we want you to be engaging in the mess, right? So we want you to be in relationship with families. And if that family is in need, we don't want the church to be the answer, because we don't want the church to be a social service agency, because we think that's the other thing that's happened is that, hey, I met somebody, I don't want to mess with them, send them to the church, right? So the church can take it, so you get an email, there's this person needs a problem. The organization then takes care of it. So the church becomes no different than a social service agency instead of a ambassador for Jesus Christ. That's what the church is supposed to be. The church isn't a social service agency. The idea in Scripture was you fed a meal to the orphan and the widows to be an ambassador to Christ, not to just serve a meal, right? The idea was I'm going to serve a meal because I love Jesus, and I'm going to do it not because it's a food pantry or a food ministry or any of those things. It's because we love Jesus, and that's what he told us to do. So Acts of Love is if you're out there and you know somebody and you're working with them and you're saying, you know what, the only barrier for me, like I'm in it relationally, I'm going to walk down the road with them relationally. I'm going to be an ambassador to Jesus, but I'm limited on my funds, right? So I'm limited on those things that I can do. Then you send in an email to Jennifer. Jennifer, we look at it, to make sure it fits what we're trying to do, which is you helping a person. We give the money so that you can be Jesus in the lives of those people, so that you can get not only a material possession, which is what you're saying, and the other thing that you're saying, a relationship, right? And when those two things go together, things change. When it's just transactional, sometimes I just don't know how much. Like, I get it. We need to help them get bedding, and we need to help them get all of the things that they need. But for the cycle not to repeat itself, they need somebody in their life to help them bring them up out of the pit, which is the piece that I think we've neglected as a church. Is I think the church has done a somewhat decent job of saying, here's money, we have a fund, like we have a mission fund, we have a help your neighbor fund, and here's the fund, and give them some bedding, but nobody knows that person. Nobody's walking a journey with that person. Nobody's going down the road with them and saying, how can I lift you up out of poverty? It might be a generational thing, right? Like, generational poverty or generational.
No, you're exactly right. And that's certainly what we hear from like the corrections people and some of these other people that have been more intimately involved with the mess. And these people don't know any other way. They don't know.
Right.
And or it's gotten so bad they've pushed back. They want to be homeless, or they found success in going to multiple churches and getting the coupons or food or whatever. And no, I mean, and that's where it's a complementary role, and I mean, they all need to exist. But I think you have to be careful to say that government's the answer, church is the answer.
No, for sure.
And probably the more direct answer is the relationship.
Yeah.
And it's as we approach Christmas time and Thanksgiving, it's good to talk about that, because it's in the giving that we receive. And I think that's something that all of us need to keep in mind. And that giving is not maybe the money or the food. The giving might be your heart or a hand or a touch. And I believe through COVID, that's where maybe a lot of the mental health and crisis came from. And you still see it some today. I think that humans need to be connected. They need to touch. We need to handshake. We need to hug. We need a hand on the shoulder. And, small, large, what have you. I mean, it can come in any form. But when we were asked to social distance and be apart and not touch and not be, Zoom's just not the same. Skype's not the same.
No.
And, we've used it in business world. It's certainly used it for efficiency and different things like that. But there's still that human connection. And when you're talking about poor and poverty and some of these troubled homes, man, I just think that plays a huge role. And I've sat beside some of the addicted folks, they've never felt love.
Right.
Their love was that drug.
Right.
And they would do anything in their power to get it.
Right.
And they really resonate to that. So to have a hand on the shoulder, a hug, a few encouraging words of support just meant the world to them in that moment. And, I'm just Andy Zay, but when I show up at those, some of them are just like aghast that a senator would say that. And I respect that. But more important than being a senator, it's that I'm Andy Zay, because I believe that, and I do that as a person.
Right.
And that's where the homeboy really is important. Because I do put my pants on the same way every day. I'll never wear a Bears jersey, but beyond that, I am a reflection of the community I come from, and I think we can't lose sight of that. And I mean, you kind of even referred to it. It was a little tough to hear. That those of us that are practitioners of our faith are the country club. And, you got to challenge your own actions sometimes. And I hear that. I don't like it. And I can see why you would say that. And, I see that in a lot of the churches
I think
I interact with.
So I think and again, I didn't mean to bash on anything. I'm just saying,
No, I get it.
from the unchurched people that I work with, people that have, I'm in relationship with lots of people. As much as there is this idea of separation of church and state, there's a separation of church and community, right? This idea of there's the church and there's the rest of us, right? And so just as we're trying to bridge this gap, right, this idea of bridging the gap between what government and churches should be doing together. Because just as that example, you talking about the caring port,
Care
did I say it
portal,
right?
yeah,
Care
portal.
porthole. And what we're like, those things working together, those together can make incredible differences, right?
Oh,
And
yeah.
that knowing that there is a way to bridge the gap, like trying to figure out how to bridge these gaps so things don't seem so separate. And so the part of the thing that I think helps that is that one, you're a real person, right? So I think the separation between government and people sometimes is that we forget your people, right? And that there's relationship and there's like, I think some of the grassroots movement that has helped, from a political standpoint is the people that are really willing to be in the community, people that are like, I am like you trying to bridge this gap together. And I think it's the same with the church, the people of the church willing to be in relationship with people that aren't. Because if you look, what happens is we tend to spend our time with people who are like us, and so whatever that looks like, you make a circle of people that are just like you. And if you do that, then whether you wanted to create it or not, you do. Right, you create a country club or you create a group of people that you're not saying you don't accept, but from the world's perspective, they see it as not. So we have to intentionally, just like you, are making. I mean, what a huge deal to show up at Life Church at 9:00 in the morning to do a podcast, right? I mean, just us. I mean, who does that? And that's. But my point
Well, I'm
is,
a politician. I like to talk, so I'll take
Yeah,
any
but-
forum I can get.
But the point is, you know what I mean? You bridge the gap, right? You bridge the gap between. I mean, we're just a normal. I mean, we're nothing different than anybody else, right?
Well, to my point, though, I believe to build on my foundation, and in saying that, and what I struggle with is that I believe church is the answer,
Yeah.
not the problem. And I think we're being told in the broader brush of society sometimes that church is the problem, and it's the Catholic priest that acted inappropriately. It's the pastor that did something here, and all of a sudden it's all faith ministries then.
Yep.
And we have so much more to offer
Yes.
than the problems that have existed or occurred. And I don't defend those in
No,
any
for
way.
sure.
Bad things happen to the best and worst of people.
Right.
But when you get into these murky gray areas like mental health, poverty, I don't see a strong institution government solution.
Right.
A supporting arm in some ways, yes. The solution into what can really be changing, I see a lot more hope and promise in our faith community and in some of our strong not-for-profit communities that are intentionally working in some of those spaces. And I think that's the battlegrounds. That's the difference making. That's what's going to solve some of these issues. And which kind of gets back to how we're changing. I mean, we're an evolving world, and I can't imagine your world and how you're communicating with the youth and trying to make a difference, and putting cell phones down or using them at appropriate times and using them in appropriate ways. And I mean, we're seeing kids in many cases that can't even talk. They can't converse.
Right.
It's through a text, it's through a screen. And, I fight that with my own children. I mean, I go 18 to 33 is the span of my children's. And I mean, the difference in that, I mean, he is a spoiled brat, our baby, right? But beyond that, just the exposure and things and ways he's, changed in education and everything.
Yeah. Well,
is
we're biased
daunting.
too because the church. I mean, we say we're biased. Like we have said, we're going to do everything possible, right? So we're going to build relationships with. We're going to partner with. We're going to do whatever we can to what we would consider. So 20 years ago.
Well, what if it were a binary choice? What if it was government fixing it or the church?
What if
And
I
if,
had
you're,
it?
and if you're playing poker, where would you put your money?
Listen, Jesus. I
Exactly.
mean, there's no. But here's the issue.
And it's not that exclusive.
Right.
And just as we talked about, there's some gray areas. There is some roles, even in the safety net, that the government's going to need to play. But I argue that we need to raise the precept of our faith and faith-based communities. I think they need to play a more dominant. I think they need to play a more active role in some of these areas. And I think, if you look at it in that context, that's what I'm advocating for, because I can encourage billions of dollars to be spent in this space, and we'll go down the road 5 years and measure it, and you're not going to see the outcomes that you think that you should have got for $500 million. You're
Right.
not.
Right.
And so that's kind of the whole discussion I'm having with myself and that I'm sharing with others. And I think, I'll double down on the church community every day and 6 times on Sunday.
Yeah, well, when we say we think the barrier. So it used to be, if you're listening, it's like a chasm, right?
Mm-hmm.
So here were people, and here was Jesus, right? Like here's where you needed to be, and people were 20 years ago were right on the edge, like to make a decision for faith. Like they were like, show me, help me understand, give me the, Jesus Christ died on the cross for your sins. You can be forgiven, and people could make that leap. Today, that chasm and then people and then like 10 barriers between ever getting to the place of even understanding the forgiveness of Christ. That's the issue that we're dealing with today, is people aren't at the precipice of making decisions. We have to help remove barriers to even help them understand who Christ is, because now there's 10, 20, 30 things that have happened in their life that don't even give them the ability to understand a loving Father, understand somebody who can forgive sins. So as a church, we're trying to figure out, we know the answer to the world, just like you said. When we say the church, what we say all the time, the answer is Jesus. We already know it. Read it in Scripture. If you read the Bible is true without error. There are people who were blind, who were healed, that were sick, and taking care of people that were raised up from a lifestyle of poverty into being able, functioning people in society. There was the church that in a community, this is what it says, in this community, because of the giving of the church, there was not one need. So it's possible for this to happen through Jesus Christ. Like, it's possible. It did happen. It has happened. We got to believe that it can happen, and we need to rise up to what that job is. And we need to continue to believe all of these things are remove barriers, but the true answer is Christ. Like, the true answer to addiction is Jesus. The true answer to mental health is Jesus. Now, are there barriers? Are there helps? Are there portals? Are all those things? Yes, but the true answer is we can't substitute the power of Jesus Christ for counseling. Like, you need counseling, but you need Jesus. You need housing, but you need Jesus. You need, stability, but you need Jesus. You need the caring porthole to get you to where you need, but you need Jesus. Like, that's, so for us, those are the things that we want to keep doing. And we think that's the perfect partnership with government, right? Mm-hmm. It's a perfect partnership with the community, is saying, listen, all of this stuff helps remove barriers, but at the end of the day, the greatest barrier to transformation in a person's life is Jesus Christ. This is the greatest barrier of transformation. And you can listen to story, I know you've heard them, story after story after story after story of somebody that their life, you look at it and you're like, how did that transform, right? Is Jesus, right? Like, all of these things help me, but Jesus is the one who delivered me, to the place that I need to be. So that's, you're right. We are, in all of our hearts, want to be able to do those things.
Who ever thought in a country of 333 million people we would talk about a crisis of loneliness?
Yeah, I know. Yes.
And even in our accessibility to social media and technology, and we talk about loneliness.
Right.
And, it's, and I think what I hear you saying is it's incumbent upon us to have our hands outstretched, to be welcoming. Mm-hmm. And, because so many of us don't feel or don't know loneliness, and maybe we do it in our own times and in our own space. But we talk about loneliness and such despair, at times, and it's wild.
Yeah, I think now that you said that, I just listened to a guy on a podcast. I can't remember which country but they just in their government now just put somebody the minister of loneliness because they have such a crisis. I wish I could remember what it was, but such a crisis of loneliness and despair that the government said one person's going to be over this problem. And I think if we would, so here's the great thing about COVID. It forced you to slow down. It forced you to sit around a table. It forced you to process some things that you didn't have time to process before. So I think I always said, I wonder what we'll learn, because what we should have learned is in that we need people. Like, this is the thing. When we got to the place when because I didn't even know it. This was the weird thing about COVID. I don't ever watch the news or know what's going on. So somebody came into a staff meeting and said, "What are you going to do about COVID?" And I'm like, what is it? Like, what's going on? And so the way they explained it, I thought it was Ebola. Like, if you touch somebody, you're going to bleed out. And so anyway, so when it came to it, we didn't really know. But then once we went through the whole, like, doing church from home, and you got to do it over a video camera, and used to preach out in our barn, do Isaac videotaping it. And I'm like, you're right. We need people. As much as we can make this work with technology, because you could make it work, right? You can make it work, but making it work wasn't the answer. And I'm like, we're getting back together. We're going to do it, because touch, being with people, spending time with people, the only thing that will matter in the end is relationships, the relationships that we have with people. So
No, I just, whatever. It's been a powerful conversation, but I mean, to reflect on some of these topics are so true. And, you think about a passing parent. Cindy and I have buried all our parents, and the last thing you want to do is just hold their hand.
that's right.
You just want to touch mom or dad and say, I love you, and thank them. And, that's the touch that just isn't there in a Zoom call, isn't there in a Skype. I mean, it's just, I think, not to simplify things, but we have institutions that vilify the church because of these incidences. I call them isolated instances that occur. And my gosh, you could turn that camera around real easy, because there's certainly enough of that in government as well. And I think we need to work together better. I think there is a role for both to play, but I think the emotional side that we've touched on today is the critical part that is so much better offered in the faith and not-for-profit community.
Yeah, and I think I always said this, the thing that keeps me up, so this idea of the crisis of kids that are in systems that'll never have a mom and dad, right? Like, kids that are just, they're going to age out of the foster care system, and went through the institutional process, and they're never going to have a mom and dad. Nobody to walk them down the aisle. Nobody to be there when it's time to teach, like a boy that, I don't know how to use a screw gun. I don't know how to put up, I don't know what to do with the car. I don't know what, I'm buying a house. How do you buy a house? And that's why, for me, the answer that the church has to give is we have to be in relationship with people. We have to be the person that they can call. We have to be the person that's going to walk down the aisle. We have to be the substitute parents. We have to be the substitute dads and moms, and the substitute person that is going to walk into a room and hold the hand of a dying person that is dying alone because they don't have family, because those are the things that are going to matter in the end. We have to substitute what no government institution can do and what no other entity can do, and that's relationships and the love of Christ. You cannot replace that with any program. It just can't be replaced. No. And that's where we have to be very passionate about.
We'll try
those things.
And we'll spend billions of dollars doing it.
But again, I didn't mean to downplay. That's not what I meant.
But no, it's very well said. And that's why when the bigger the issue, you have to reflect on the core of the problem. And, okay, so this is here now. Who managed it before?
Right.
Where was it before? And that's where I get a little introspective with some of these things, because it's like, okay, so we spend the money or we create an agency. How is that going to fix that? And it's not going to create the human touch. It's not going to create the compassion. It's not going to create that. I mean, and even in politics, we use those buzzwords sometimes, compassionate conservatism, and I'm going to be a compassionate leader. And it's like, are you? And I mean, the reality is, and if I get elected Congress, I'm serving 13 counties. So, I mean, I can't get out and touch 750,000 people on a regular basis because that's how many you would represent. And, so we need strong, powerful,
So I'll just
engaging.
I'll put a bug
faith
in your ear.
ministers. Yes.
What we need is strong, developing coaching networks that not only can give a resource and give a tool, but give a relationship, because it's more than mentoring. It's so much more than mentoring. It's coaching. It's walking a journey. It's walking down a road. It's using multiple different resources, because somebody does need counseling, somebody does need mentoring, and somebody does need, but you need a coach. We need coaching networks set up, because the coaching network world is usually only in the business world, right? So the business world gets it all the time. Like, people, you can hire a business coach and those guys come in and you pay lots of money for it. And again, they help you become a better business person, a better organization, but if you could take that coaching network and say, but let's do it for the normal people. Let's do it for the people who can't afford it. Let's do it for the people that need more than a handout, that need more than food. They need more than bedding. They need more than counseling. They need somebody to oversee the relationship going down the road. I think if we could do that, that's what we're praying for. Like, we're praying, how can the church figure out coaching networks that can bring in lots of different people, but an oversight that can help move somebody and walk a journey with them and be responsible for, to be able to see that, so that it takes all of the different elements but puts them together. And the one thing that they can always count on is a relationship with somebody who will be there with them, a coach that will walk a journey with them.
That's great.
So, yeah.
That's great stuff.
Sorry, we're at an hour and 11 minutes.
Wow.
Oh, okay.
Well,
and you barely even spoke. You just sat
I
back
didn't,
and
need,
sorry.
I didn't need to speak
I'm
today. I'm,
sorry,
totally
Jennifer.
fine. Nope, I'm good. That was interesting. That was good.
Yeah, so
That's fine.
Andy, if you could give a couple ways that people could connect with you, like, will there be a link? Like, can we put out a link afterwards to be able to do it? And how would they? What's the best way to get with you? Is there like an email?
Well,
or?
the Indiana Senate is certainly my current role.
Okay.
That would be a way, and you can access that pretty easily once
Okay.
you get to Indiana General Assembly. Go to the Senate side and access me there.
Okay.
I mean,
What about the
Zay
Caring
Leasing and
Porthole
Rentals? You can get with me right here, and then AndyZay.com is my campaign page for.
And how about the
Congress.
Caring Porthole?
The Care Portal?
Sorry, I
the
say it wrong.
No,
Portal.
I'm
We're
sorry.
The black hole.
I keep saying it wrong.
I can send you a link on that.
Okay.
Right now, we've rolled that out in 10 counties. We've tried to be strategic about it
okay.
in some of the more
Sure.
intensive areas with DCS. We opened it in Marion County, Vanderburgh,
Yep.
down in Evansville, and then Terre Haute, and then Madison County. It is over in Wabash right now, and Allen County. So those are some of
Yeah,
them.
we have a lot of people from Wabash, coming
Do
to
you?
life.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that might be something that if Nick can get the link, we can put it out there.
But they actually started in Wabash, which is a little unique even for the Care Portal. A school counselor is a vetor, so they
Oh,
can
wow.
determine, like if a kid comes to school without any shoes or a backpack, they can help meet that need through the faith community in a moment's notice.
Yeah, good. Well, Andy, thank you. I mean, really
No.
appreciate you coming on, taking time. We appreciate you sharing your wisdom, helping clear up some things. I think in that, helping clear up the heart behind, sometimes it's a disconnect and you don't really know, and the heart behind. And we appreciate, what you're doing, and appreciate, again, that you're willing to come down to the small guys like us. And,
Stop.
well, I mean, no, I mean,
I'm your homeboy.
But
We're
listen, I
good.
think it's important for people to understand, like, I don't mean this bad, but we're nobodies. I mean, we're just a church and a community trying to do, and that you're willing to come down. I think that shows when we're talking about bridging gaps. Like, I think those are the things that people are looking for. So,
Well, and I really believe that. I mean, the bigness of our society, whether it's the big football team, the big
Yep.
school, the big industry, the big, we get enamored with that. And I still think, as we spend a lot of time talking about today, it's the intimacy, it's the smallness, it's the compassion, it's the touch that really make a difference. And and that's what I aspire to be as a legislator. It's easy to get caught up in big ideas and big motivations, but we can't lose sight of where we came from. And I certainly believe that with Huntington. I certainly believe that with my faith background. And, I think that's certainly what you guys are doing here at Life. And I'm proud to be a supporter of your work and in your community and even your coffee out here at Kingston. So it's all good because, I think that's really the best of our communities and the best of America, honestly.
Yeah, good. So Jennifer, you want to send us out with the number and
Sure
for
can.
people? And
Yep. So if you're not part of the roundtable texting group, you can text podcast to 260-408-8383, and we'll let you know when the podcast drops. If you want to be on the podcast, let us know that too. And sometimes we pose out questions, so we want to be a part of that.
yeah, good. So if you're listening and or watching, make sure that when this clip comes out, one of the things that we'd love for you to do is to like, share, comment. That gives us an opportunity to get it onto different feeds for different people to be able to see it. After you watch it, after you listen to it, if you see Andy again, we'd love for you to come up, say hi, talk to, again, bridge the gap between somebody who is out there doing the work and continue to pray that we can figure out how to get these things together. But we'd love for your support in that. So thanks everybody for joining us, and we'll see you guys next week.
Bye.
Bye.